Thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon for our Speaker Series event, which also happens to mark the opening of our new exhibition, Build It Yourself, Bay City's Aladdin Company. My name is Brian Whitledge and I'm the Public Services Librarian in the Clarke, and we're pleased that you are here. Before beginning, we are going to acknowledge that today we are here on the beautiful lands maintained for generations by the Anishinaabe people, the indigenous inhabitants of Michigan, with whom we continue to partner today at Central Michigan University. The typical housekeeping things are in order, so please mute your microphone, or your cell phones. We're also going to record this event, and so by being here, you could be on the recording if you ask any questions particularly. The video will be later available on CMU's Chipcast as well as YouTube. Also, because it is being recorded, we have the microphone, so at the end of the presentation, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll come running around with the microphone so that you can ask Mr. Campbell your questions. After this afternoon's talk, we will be holding an exhibition reception in the Clarke, and you can join us for refreshments, see the exhibition, talk with one another, learn some stories about kit homes, specifically of the Aladdin Company from Bay City. Before getting to our overall presentation, one of the reasons that we are doing this exhibition now is that we recently had uploaded to the web, several catalogs from Aladdin. And so if you're interested in viewing catalogs from the Aladdin Kit Home Company, you can view them online through the CMU Library's Clarke Digital Collections page and view several of the models, the furnishings, all sorts of information. So that's online. In the next 2 months, all of the small order sales logs will also be online, which are the sales indexes for every sale out of the Bay City Mill between 1914 and 1981. So part of this exhibit is that we have this wonderful resource that will be available to you. There are plenty of QR codes, plenty of shortened URLs around the exhibit, so be sure to get a look for it. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Ron Campbell, AIA. He's the Principal Planner and Preservation Architect for Oakland County Planning and Economic Development Services. He provides design and technical assistance for Oakland County's 28 Main Street communities and preservation assistance for more than 400 historic resources in 62 municipalities throughout the county. He has aided projects ranging from the National Landmark Structure at Cranbrook to resources on the National Register like the 1886 Holly Depot, the 1927 McMath-Hulbert Observatory, the 1903 Park Davis Research Barn, and other local resources. Prior to joining the county, Ron was senior partner in a successful Michigan architectural and engineering firm where his work received international, national, and local design recognition. Ron served on the National Main Street Leadership Council and was president of the Main Street Architects, representing 44 states. He remains involved in many preservation efforts throughout Michigan and in disaster and preservation assistance in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and Louisiana as well. In addition to numerous speaking engagements, Ron is an author and speaker on many topics on the preservation of the built environment. He co-authored Michigan's Destination Depots, Lighthouses Along Rivers of Steel, and currently he serves on the Michigan Barrier-Free Design Board and was recently honored with the Michigan Historic Preservation Network Lifetime Achievement Award. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Ron Campbell.
I always warn you to hold your applause until the end. I don't know if I'll be worthy of it. I'll get hooked up here, and hopefully you'll be able to hear me clear. Perfect.
It isn't tuned in.
I'm not tuned in?
No, it's not working.
Oh. Did I turn it off? Any better? No. I'll do it this way. I'll hold it. Okay, Brian. Yeah, okay. I'll start without, my notes are in the screen up here, so, there it is. I'm kind of curious on the audience, how many have a kid home? Just by a show of hands. And you're sure of it, right? Okay, good. How many here are students at the university? I understand there might be some students. Okay, good, good. The rest of you just general interest in kid homes?
Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start this by showing you some nomenclature. A site-built home, a manufactured home, and modular panelized prefab home, okay? One at a time. We'll get into the actual construction of all these, but a site-built home is basically that. It's been around for, what, thousands of years. It uses local materials, is constructed on-site with materials that are at hand. Manufactured homes are pre-manufactured. They roll them out of the shop that built them, and they roll them onto a site, connect the power, the gas, and sewers, and you're off and running. Panelized or modular, they build components and they set them together. And we'll see where the panelized, what we have today, is really a kind of inherited from the kid homes. So, site-built home will end up looking something like this. A plan book home could look like this. And a kid home would look like this. That's why I asked if you had, you were sure that you had a kid home. And I still see some hands out there and say yes. And I see some individuals that probably know more about kid homes than I do. So don't let me fool you. So when we look at these, it's like the site-built home. We gather all the materials together, and we may have made the pizza sauce. We may have grown the tomatoes and the peppers, and we combine all the ingredients together to make a pizza. A plan book home, think of it as it's a recipe. It's just general instructions. This is a home that you may like. What's it going to look like? And then a kid home is kind of your Chef Boyardee. Now, I kind of thought later, this is probably not a good analogy, because Chef Boyardee pizzas compared to home-baked pizzas, not quite as good. But we'll see that the kid homes is just as every bit as good as a site-built or a modular home. What do we end up with at the end? Well, we end up with a pizza, right? They all come out the same. Some better than others. And then I was asked at one presentation, well, what about if you buy a home that's already built? And I had to throw this in. It's like just asking for home delivery. Okay, I want to give you a little background because I don't start out with the catalogs at first because we had catalogs. In fact, Benjamin Franklin had a sales brochure or catalog that he put on selling books and valuable objects. And this was, I think, in 1744, so it goes back some time. And then in the late 1700s, we had Asher Benjamin, who developed these kind of a country guide, a pattern book for builders and owners in the rural countryside that didn't have maybe the education to know what the proportions were and how it all went together. So this is what he came up with. Then, in the mid-1800s, we started seeing a little more refinement and pattern books that were nothing more than basically an elevation and a floor plan. They really had very few details, if any, and they left out a lot of the design aspects of it. Andrew Jackson Downing, he was the star of the day. 1841, he developed a booklet that was a thesis on the theory and practice of landscape architecture. He was a landscape architect, and he had a lot of interest in landscape and how it blended into the built environment. Then along in the late 1880s, he met an architect, Davis. And the two of them combined to create catalogs such as this one, which is Cottage Residence, 1842, and later the Architecture of Country Houses. And they were a big influence in the Gothic style, Carpenter Gothic in particular. And people would just land on their words and what they were suggesting. And that gave us a lot of our Gothic columns that you see throughout the country today. Then towards the end of the 18th century, Eastwood, household taste, Charles Lockwood, Eastlake, and the Eastlake extension of furniture and things that you have that are prized now throughout antique shops. And more planned books. And then George Barber, an architect, came up with the Cottage Souvenir Book, where he gave a little more detail on what, how to build it and things like that. He has a remarkable record. He has built in all 50 states, which at the time he was there was not 50 states. But as it turns out, he had built in all 50 states houses. He also had houses that were built in foreign countries, Japan and the Philippines in particular. And 48 of his 120 different floor plans, 48 of them are on the National Register of Historic Places. So not a bad record. Now we get into the real catalogs, right? And the first one was the Blue Book, Tiffany catalog. Has anybody here received the Tiffany catalog? I didn't think so, because it's a pretty exclusive catalog. Now, not that you're not exclusive, but I don't know if you're gonna, I was gonna say, right, you'll have to take note if anybody raises their hand, because they make a good donation to the but they were really the first one, and this is still published today. Tiffany, you can order it online. You have to fill out a form and request the catalog, but I checked it out just before I came here, and it's still available. Of course, in 1872, we had Montgomery Ward's, and this was the first general catalog that really hit the market. They sold everything out of this. It was the wish book, if you want to call it that. And it assured its place in history when the New York Club displayed the Ward catalog with Webster's dictionary as two of the most influential books in American culture. Then in 1894, we had Sears and Roebuck come out with their catalog, much like the Montgomery Ward. Today, it's Amazon. And does anybody, I want to keep it informal. Anybody know when the first internet sale occurred? Guess? 1994, first internet sale. Does anybody know when the catalogs peaked? 2007. And you say, yeah, it took me back too. 2007, there were more catalogs mailed out to households than at any other time in history. Then COVID hit and it slid down, it dropped considerably, but it's on a rebound now. So we're used to shopping from catalogs. I know I did some Christmas shopping from catalogs this past year. So what brought all this confluence together? We have the catalogs having been in place, but what brought kit homes into our culture? Well, first of all, I believe it was part of the rural free delivery, FDR, right? RFT, excuse me, FDR was the president. Rural free delivery, 1896, and it made that products could be bought and purchased via mail and sent to you via mail. Then in 1928, we had the bulk rate, and that made it a little bit cheaper to ship some of these things. But then we had a population shift, a migration from the rural to the urban environment. And that happened right around 1920. It broke off, we were just about 50-50 and has continued to increase in urban population ever since. But I feel the real factor, and I'm a railroad buff, we do a presentation on railroad depots, as was mentioned in my introduction. Amazing what the railroads brought to this country. This is the network of railroads just prior to the Civil War, 1860. After the Civil War, 1890, this is what it looked like. You talk about boom, huh? But then if we go a little bit further, 1919, we had over 164,000 miles of track. This is more track than all the countries in Europe combined. In fact, even today, we have more track in the United States than our next closest competitor, which is China, almost twice as much. So the railroads still influence us. And the railroads started really not with passengers, but with freight. And then they found out during the Civil War, well, you know what? We can move a lot of people with this too. And you'll see that all these little depots that we had, there was about 4,000 in Michigan, only about 300 left. They served the kit homes very well. So it was ordered by mail, delivered by rail. And you see that in a lot of the ads. And these products were shipped to the local community, the depot nearest you, which wasn't 4,000 depots throughout the state. Not too bad. You'd probably find a depot just down the road. Now, kit homes is really an American phenomenon. There was a slight tick over in Canada, but it was in Canada, they got the kit idea from Aladdin. In fact, Aladdin, shortly after they started producing homes, opened up an office in Toronto at the invitation. So, with that, it really is a mailer that's distinctly unique to America. So what is the process of building a kit home? Well, you start out with, you gather all the materials together, you pre-cut them, they're numbered, they're packed and shipped with all the ingredients necessary. They're delivered by train to the local depot. And then you and your friends come and unload the boxcar, or box cars. Sometimes took two. And you think it's hard to get a person today to move you on Saturday. Can you imagine asking them, well, come on out, we're going to build a house. I don't know. But they would pull those cars over, and they would sit there for about a week. You, as the owner, had to come and empty them. So you had to gather your sons and daughters and friends and relatives over to unload this boxcar and get it out to your site. Now, you say, well, can kit homes be that good? It kind of had a bad reputation, I think, for a while. Kit homes, how could you possibly get it? Well, when you really begin to look at it, you say, well, first of all, it was standard size. It's maximum efficiency. They had bulk buying. They didn't buy the lumber for one house, they bought it for many houses. A lot of reduced waste, and we'll see that in just a minute. It had a controlled environment. Now, if you were a carpenter, you know, it's been pretty chilly out there. I wouldn't want to be out there building a house in some of the weather we've had. But would I opt for this kind of enclosed environment, heated, light? Sure. Why? Who wouldn't? So I think you had to draw on some of the best carpenters and people around. Modern equipment and templates. And the skilled labor. As I say, I think skilled labor would kind of congregate at these shops. This is how they would, how do you get efficiency? Well, they found a way. This is from Aladdin. This was how do you get 20 feet of lumber out of 16 foot. And if you can see how they cut the lumber, it's at an angle. when they bear this, you know, this little section up in here really is not providing any more strength than what it is over here. It's the whole span that provides the section modulus. So by cutting it like this, they can actually increase the amount of lumber that it took to build a house, but efficiently and cost effectively. Now, it was a new industry that opened up, and I had the privilege of talking to Mrs. Smith here, who owns a kid home, recently built, and it was customized. And you think, well, a kid home is standard. Well, they were, but you could also customize them. And you'll see that in the exhibit. Beautiful exhibit too, by the way, Brian. And women were involved. They entered the male market, maybe for the first time. And I like to look at the marketing, we will in just a minute, but the marketing that these kid homes had was phenomenal. They knew where the market was. They knew who controlled the purse strings, and they knew who made the decisions regarding the house, right? It was the women. And so they hired women to do just that. What do you do? What would you recommend for this design? How could we dress it up? They not only selected colors, but they also created accessory items, flower boxes, porches. What do you need on a porch? Where do you want the kitchen? Where do you want the conveniences of the layout of the kitchen sinks and things? So they were actively involved in the design of these kid homes. Again, the order would be filled in 1 or 2 boxcars. It'd be loaded at the company's bill and then sent out to the customer's homestead via the rail. As I said, they would park it on a siding or a freight yard to unload by the owner. And usually the customer, if he didn't build it themselves, they would hire a contractor to do it. And this was not uncommon. Oftentimes that's what ended up doing it. What came on the box there? This is out of a 1952 Aladdin catalog. What you're getting is 10,000 to 30,000 pieces. That included framing, siding, flooring. You talk about a jigsaw puzzle, right? Doors, windows, 750 pounds of nails, 27 gallons of paint. Amazing. Oh yes, and I can't forget the materials. List and assembly instructions. And I think some of those are on an exhibit in the exhibit room too. So, as we said, every piece of lumber was numbered or marked to where it would go. The instructions gave you that. The customer would arrange, as I indicated, by a local carpenter or contractor to assemble the house usually. And it'd be on a piece of property owned by the customer, or that would be mortgaged by the customer. And I say that because that's going to be a key component in a few years, key change in the industry. Now we talked a little bit about advertising, and this has always been a fascinating area for me. Most of the kid homes, just like cars and other retail merchandise, kid homes were promoted through catalogs, direct mail catalogs. Popular Mechanics, newspapers, and direct mail. And each company had a little twist to it, okay? We have Ready Built House out in Portland, Oregon. They drove around with this little car with a model popped up on it. And you come into town with that, is it going to draw a group of people? Yeah, as you can see here. Pacific Homes in Los Angeles, they had a similar one. Now, what's interesting about Ready Built out in Portland is there was a Henny, I believe was his name, that went to Portland. He came from Bay City. In fact, he worked for Aladdin. And he went out to Portland and got together with a fellow, and they built houses under this name for a number of years. They had a little disagreement. They parted ways. The one fellow, he disappeared. Henny, I think, stayed in business for a few more years, and then finally he disappeared. The last time, I guess, record of him was in Florida. But this was a different advertising technique. And best of all, I love this. This is an ad by Aladdin, and it's, what do you want, a new home or a new car? Well, you know, if you got the car, there's nothing but worry, fear, and debt. But you get a new home, it's peace, happiness, and comfort. So make sure you buy your home before you buy your car. Now, what I think is funny about this is, I've read in records that Aladdin had communications with Ford Motor Company on the assembly line technique. Now, some people say, well, they were just mimicking Ford Motor Company in the assembly line. No, not really, because the assembly line came in, what, 1913? They started here with Aladdin in, what, 1906, 08? So they were a little bit ahead of the game on this. So I'm not sure. Ford, it was reported that they suggested to Aladdin that they keep it simple, stay to one model. Well, of course, Aladdin didn't take that advice, and they branched out into several different models. And I think to their credit, they succeeded in that. Had it been one model, it wasn't like a Model T. People weren't buying a house just for the thrill of it, a new gimmick on the horizon at this time. It wasn't a necessity, but the home was. And that was their whole message here. Now, anytime a new technique comes out, whether it be cell phones or whatever, you have to watch Hollywood. And once Hollywood jumps into the fray of making films out of it, you know you got a success. And I'm thinking of, like, you got mail that showed what the email would be. And in the cell phone, Cell 2016, or phone that came out in 2002, these are all movies that dealt with either email or cell phones. Well, we have that with Kid Homes, the Murphy bed. You know, everything from Charlie Chaplin to Abbott and Costello. I'm not sure who the lady was, but these are all comic reactions to the phenomenon. Now, I don't know if anybody's heard of 1 Week, but this was fantastic. This is a film, and it's in the National Archives. Suggested as one of the great cultural films of its time. Buster Keaton. And the story behind this is pretty simple. This is a newlywed couple, and the former suitor of the bride decided, I'm going to go all out and I'm going to give them a perfect gift. I'm going to give them a kit home they can put up. How great a guy is that, huh? One little hitch though. He kind of switched the labels on the box so that the house didn't really come out as you expected. Not only that, they found out they built it on the wrong site. So now they got to move it. Now this is before digital photography and everything. This house was actually built on a round table. And they could change, they would turn this around for different sun angles and stuff like that. Also for wind and rain and all that. And you'll see that as they moved it down the street, they got caught on a railroad track. Couldn't get it over the railroad track. Of course, you can hear the whistle in the background, can't you? Yep. We gotta get it off of here. And they tried and tried and tried and they couldn't, but then, whew, goes the train. It was on a different track than what the house was caught on. No problem, we survived that one until the next train came on the track that they were on, and it totally destroyed us. Now, there was only one take on this, right? Because this is actually a train hitting the house. So, all said and done, they just put a for sale sign on it and said, anybody that wants it, you can have it. Now, you probably started thinking that added a negative attitude to kid homes, which what really wasn't meant to be. But I want to show you the history of kid homes, at least among the major developers. First and foremost, Aladdin Homes, right here in Bay City, 1906. Followed in Pacific Ready Cut Homes in Los Angeles, 1908. Bennett Homes in New York, 1910. Harris Brothers, Chicago, 1910 also. Ready Built House, that was the one I was talking about earlier, Portland, Oregon, 1911. Louis Liberty Kid Homes, another Bay City. And we'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute. Sterling Homes, 1916, another Bay City group. Gordon Van Tine in Iowa, 1916. Sears and Roebuck, 1916. And finally, Montgomery Ward's in 1919. Kind of the last ones on the scene. Now, what was I going to say about Sears? No, it'll come to me. It'll come to me. So then, I ran across this comparison chart of the 8 major mail-order home companies. And you can see there that Aladdin and all these, they produced a lot of homes. In fact, in one year, I think Aladdin, when we get into it, I think it was around 2% of all housing in the United States was put there by Aladdin. So I'm going to take these kind of companies in order and just give you a little bit of history on them. Pacific Ready Cut Homes, pretty standard. The one on the right is the brochure. Of course, the one on the upper left, that's the same house today. And you say, well, what in the world? Why do you have Mickey Mouse there in the corner? Well, it's Los Angeles, right? Well, better connection than that. There's 2 brothers that decided that they were young and energetic, and they decided that they would buy a couple of these specific homes, and they would erect them not too far from their studio, and they would rent them out. And of course, the brothers were Roy and Walt Disney. And so they were the proud owners of this house that was built and still standing there in Los Angeles, California. It was this company that really spawned the Bungalow Court, which is a National Registry District now. And they sold those from 1908 to 1940. Montgomery Ward's, of course, Montgomery Ward, they started the whole mail order business. They were well established in mail order. People recognized them. They got into it very solidly, but late in the game. They didn't construct the houses. It was Gordon Van Tine that really constructed them for them. Which Van Tine, you'll see in a minute, also did it for Sears. But they also, I think it was 1927, they offered mortgage. So not only did they sell you the home, but they would finance it for you. Harris Brothers, out of Iowa. Interesting story here in Harris Brothers. You say, what in the world you got a Ferris wheel there for? Well, they started really in the demolition business and salvage. And they have the noted claim of taking down the world's first Ferris wheel at the 1893 Chicago's Columbia Exposition. They also took down the second Ferris wheel in history, and that was in St. Louis a few years following. But by 1916, they got out of that business somewhat, and they went into kid homes. Liberty Homes. Now this is interesting. This Liberty Homes is Bay City, right? This was a marriage with Lewis Manufacturing and Aladdin, which I say it was a non-happy marriage. It turned out to be a non-happy marriage. It went from a non-happy marriage to homes of character. And the story behind it was Aladdin contracted with Lewis to manufacture their homes and mail order. Well, after several years of doing this, I think Lewis discovered, you know, they're making pretty good profit on this stuff. I'd like a share of it. And he asked to become a stockholder or a principal owner of the Aladdin company. Well, the family said, no, you keep making them, we're fine just as we are. Well, he didn't buy that, so he said, well, I've got the equipment, I'm gonna start making my own homes. So they quickly changed from Lewis, and they went over to Sterling, which is a manufacturing company, and Lewis Liberty became the competing entity out of Bay City. And the second marriage then for Aladdin was to International Mill and Timber Company, which became Sterling Homes. Same thing happened there. The marriage broke up when Sterling wanted a little more piece of the action, and Aladdin said, no, we're keeping it to ourselves. And so they developed a whole series of catalogs, much like Aladdin, and they sold for quite a while here in Bay City. Gordon Van Tyne Company, well, that was established in 1907. They were more of a mill and lumber company, and they constructed these prefab houses for Montgomery Ward's second and first for Sears, until Sears opened their own mill and cut the contract with Van Tyne, and Van Tyne quickly found Montgomery Ward's as the next big producer of contract homes, kid homes. Where's the catalog we're going through? Okay. Now, the big compete, most people say, oh, they know the Sears home, right? Well, Sears was popular. They were a big retail outfit out of Chicago. They had catalogs. They employed a lot of people, and they made a big to-do, but they never produced their own homes. They always relied on somebody else to produce them. And the homes they produced, they went by several names. There was modern homes, there was ready-cut homes, I think there was standard built, simplex, honor built. All these were produced by Sears under different names. And Sears, like Montgomery Ward's, they also offered financing, as did many of the companies doing it, except Aladdin. Okay. They were on a cash-only basis. Houses already cut, no big labor bills. They had a lot of graphics that showed how houses go together. I hope you take a look in the exhibit, because there's some really great catalogs, very detailed techniques and drafting of details of how to assemble a kid home. And of course, modern heating systems. I don't know, this looks like the king of his house, the king of his castle. If my kids ever acted like that, I'd be happy. This was the Sears Martha Washington house. In 1927, it was $3,571. Very sophisticated house. This particular one was built outside Washington DC in 1926. It sold in 2017 for 1.06 million, just a little over $1 million. Not a bad return on your money, huh? Even if you figure I gotta buy the site and I gotta pay the carpenter, but not a bad return. This was the Sears Crescent House. And now I'm from Oakland County, so I gotta plug a little bit for Oakland County. This is in Waterford, that same house. Another one from Sears. Notice this is the Honor Built. And this one is in Royal Oak. Notice even the handrail or the balusters on the front porch are the same as in the picture. That's one of the key components you can help identify. If you've got some of the detailing that you see on your house, exactly what you see in the catalog, chances are you've got a pretty good kit-built home. This one I couldn't really tell. It was a kit home. It's out of Rochester. It's in Rochester Hills. But they're slightly different between both of these. One is a Sears and the other one is Montgomery Ward's. But when you compare the pictures, they're slightly different. And this one I really love. Interesting here, I kind of enlarged the floor plan so you can see. And I always ask it, do you see anything unusual about this floor plan? No bathroom. Yeah. Don't worry because we can provide us at extra cost a two-seater for adult and a child. And an asphalt shingle roof. And you even kind of get the, well, maybe coming along with the catalog, you can have the paper that will be a supply for a while. And so, you know, we've gone from those simple four-room cottages and garages to some pretty sophisticated homes in the kit industry. And I overheard some people say, well, I wonder if they ever built anything other than kit homes. Was there schools? Yeah, there were. In fact, this church in South Lyon was a kit home from Sears, built in 1930. It's been moved to McCaddy Park and is there with their depot and a couple of other buildings, and they use it for weddings. Hatchery Park. This was built by the state of Michigan. Hatchery Park was a place where they would hatch trout and spawn them and release them into the lakes. And this is one of the first trout. So this was a house at the hatchery. It's now owned by the Historical Society, and they keep it as their museum. So what happens about this time? Bingo, you know, everything falls out. Everything falls to pieces. And you begin to look at what impact did it have on the kit home industry. Well, 1929, let's go ahead. Ready built, they're out by 1928. Montgomery Ward's, they bail out in 1931. They closed with no notice or anything. They just quit producing homes, and that cut their ties with Van Tine, and they were even surprised by the move from what I can read. Harris Brothers out of Chicago, 38. Sears and Roebuck, 1940. When they closed, as I understand it, they kept no records. They disposed of all the records, sale records. That's what's so special about Clarke Library here. You have all the records of Aladdin, and that's just incredible. Bennett Homes, Van Tine, they're out in 47, couldn't survive the war. And look who's left. All Bay City. All those producers, all the small ones are probably well shut down by now. These are the major ones in the country, and they're all gone, except for these three that are from Bay City. 73 and 75, two of them bite to dust, and who's left standing? The inventor of it all, Aladdin. Incredible story. Now, you say, well, what can we possibly do? I mean, what caused such a depression? Well, I mean, not the depression, but why did homes suffer so much? Well, first of all, you got to remember, there was no mortgage. Those companies that went out quickly, they held the mortgage. In fact, Montgomery Ward specifically said that they bailed from the market because they could no longer make a profit. They weren't making a profit on the house by selling it. They were making profit on the interest that you would be paying as the owner. And when people quit paying, what do you collect on? Well, you don't have any property attached to the land. So if the bank foreclosed on the land, what do you do with the house? You build it. All they supplied was a pile of lumber, right? And the materials. So what do? You disassemble it and give it back to the company? They were at this quandary. What do? We can't collect on anything. We don't have nothing that will represent collateral that's worthwhile to us. And they collapsed. Interesting dilemma that I never thought of when I first started doing research on kid homes. Now, I'm going to switch tones here a little bit. And does anybody remember the program Connections? No? Connections, it was a fascinating program where this guy would take a little bit of history and some seemingly irrelevant happening in history, and he would connect it throughout, and it would lead to this, oh, wow, I never knew that. Well, I hope to do that here in a much smaller way, okay? I'm going to start out with, I want you to think of Clifford Brooks. Clifford Brooks is sitting at home one evening, and he's watching his wife sew. And she's sewing from patterns. These paper patterns, kind of the tissue paper like dressman drawn, right? They have the pattern, and everything is there. You follow that pattern, and you cut your cloth to that pattern, and then you stitch it together as they show you, and presto, you got a dress. Well, he sat there and he thought, you know, if you can do a dress like that, and he was a sailor, he was a weekend sailor on the Great Lakes, lived in Bay City, and he was a newspaper man, advertising in addition to that, in addition to it. And he said, if you can do that with dresses, why can't you do that with boats? So he took this idea, and he talked to a gentleman that was a professional boat builder in Saginaw for a long time. And just as the people at Henry Ford told Aladdin not to get into a lot of different style homes, he said, you'll never make any money. This is a financial disaster if you try it. Nobody's going to buy a boat that you make yourself, and it's just never going to work. Never going to work. Well, he took that encouragement, and he started his own company, Brooks Boats. And he went to a lumber company, and they began to cut these. He drew up the plans on his dining room table, and within, geez, a year or so, he's really going top guns at this. People are lapping this up. No pun intended. No, so he becomes pretty successful at this financially. It was a slow start, but really elevates itself. He takes out an ad in 1903 in the Scientific Journal, Build Your Own Boat. And in 1905, he had built 6,000 boats already. He employed 37 people. One more year, he had 97 people on his payroll. And one of those people, now I hope to settled this, because I get different reports on this, settled it here at Clarke Library. One of his employees was William Sovereign, who was supposedly a draftsman at Brooks Boats. Now, I don't know, do you know if that's true or not? Anybody? No? Because I also hear that William is also an advertising executive. So I don't know, maybe both, who knows? Well, eventually he teams up and gets this idea. If you can build a boat out of this cut stuff, why can't we build a house out of it? Or at least a garage and cottages. And he teams up with his brother, Otto, and they established the Aladdin company. Now, it's not called Aladdin at first. What is it called? North American Construction Company. And it's knocked down houses. They find out in time that that's probably not the best term to use for kid homes. We need to kind of spice that up a little bit. Again, it's one of those little daggers that says, oh, kid homes aren't what site-built homes are. Well, no, they really are. But you can see they start out with garages and summer cottages. Very, very simple buildings. But somehow the marketing genius took over. And they come up with Aladdin. And what a fabulous name for a dream house, right? This was every American's dream, was to own their own home. And you could do it now with Aladdin. From the simple to luxurious. So the genie is out. And they were sold by, very diligently sold by the golden rule. The golden rule being, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, right? And they really thoroughly practiced that. If you look at some of the letters in the exhibit here, it's amazing the notes that they get back. Again, that ad of own a home first, very, very insightful. And the brochures that they put out, they are worthy. They're collector's items right now just for the artwork. Not only for the history that they have, but for the artwork. Beautifully rendered homes and positioning of both in plan and isometric view of floor plans. In 1918, 2% of the homes built in the U.S. were by Aladdin. 2%, that's a pretty significant jump right there. And we have them, again, a lot of homes in southeast Michigan, Berkeley, Clawson, Detroit, Flint, Pontiac, Waterford, and Ypsilanti, all notable. They have high, very high volume of kid homes. Not just Aladdin, but all over. In fact, Clawson, you can go onto their website, ask for Clawson kid homes. There's a whole brochure, and they'll show you the kid home as it stands today and the advertisement for it when it was built. So very interesting. And they held tours up until just a few years ago. I think COVID did that in. But they had tours of nothing but kid homes. So, if you can build a kid home, I'm thinking of the brother they were always imagining, if you can build a home, why can't you build a neighborhood? And if you could build a neighborhood, why couldn't you build a town? You remember that little church I showed you? Well, not only could you get the church, but you could get the school, you could get the bank, you could get the road, you could get everything needed in a town, in addition to the homes. In fact, Austin Village in Birmingham, England, and you'll see that on exhibit here too, that was built during World War I, when a lot of worker housing was needed very quickly, and most of the men were off to war, and so that they had to have an easy system to put together. And I gotta believe their connection to Canada probably had something to deal with that. But anyway, they sent 200 homes to England. The first shipment was torpedoed and they lost it. It's at the bottom of the North Atlantic right now. The other shipment was quickly prepared and sent out, and they were erected. This is the map, the layout that 1936, taken between the two wars, drawn up. It survived the bombing during World War II, and it's now on the, what would be the equivalent to the National Trust, the Historic Preservation here in the United States. So we see this time and time again that it wasn't just single homes, but they were shipping out numerous homes to the same companies, not only overseas, but also in the United States, different cities. And just as Disney did with the Ready Cut, oftentimes they went to developers and or contractors who were building these homes for their clients. Aladdin, they served both world wars. In fact, it was interesting, I saw on display that they also did barracks up at Fort Brady. And it's interesting that Fort Brady came into play. We recently got a call from Independence Oaks, Township Park in Independence Township, and they said, we've got a building here, we don't know what to do with it, we're gonna tear it down unless we can find use for it. Well, we did a little research, and it was Brady Lodge. It was the first Boy Scout camp in America. They had no idea what it was. Now, this is not that long ago, right? I mean, this is 30, 40 years that this building has been used by the Boy Scouts, and yet in that time, they totally forgot. The institutional knowledge was gone. And did a little research on Brady, and lo and behold, Brady, this was the son of General Brady, who was sent here to build Fort Brady at Sault Ste. Marie. He was known as the father of the U.S. Army. In fact, it was the Bradys that had men in every war since the Revolution. Once the Daughters of the American Revolution heard that, guess what? They made that their project to fund was the restoration of Brady Lodge. And so Brady Lodge has got new life. There was a canteen or a cafeteria for the Boy Scouts when they camped there, and they completely restored the building and using it today. All just by the hair of the chin was it saved from being torn down. Usable building. So ran across the sales record, and you look at this and you think, wow, this is the Aladdin sales record. They peaked in 1926, but look at the fall. It was almost like, what did they know, or what does this chart say about the coming depression? Were people worried? It looks like it, because it really fell off. But again, you can see the bumpy road ahead for Aladdin, but they survived. And it's because they didn't tie their houses to the land, they didn't tie it to a mortgage, they tied it on a cash-only basis. Those people owned the house when they got it, put it together. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I got about 200 more slides. They realize I'm kidding, okay. Okay, so the question is, Mommy, where did my house come from? Well, we're going to look at it, and we say, well, look at the architectural style of your house versus what you see in the catalog. Everything is online now. And you can get a pretty fair idea, okay, does it really look like this? How close is it? Knowing that there are some discrepancies that there can be customizing. Look for the physical evidence on those, like the railings on the one porch that we saw in Rochester. Look for documentation. Talk to your neighbors. You'd be surprised. I had a workman out at my house that was built in 1905, and lo and behold, we got to talking, and he worked on it with a previous owner back in the night, and that was the lady that owned it since ever. And he did work there. And now I can get a complete history of what he did to that house just by talking a little bit to him. So it pays off. And keep an open mind. Okay. Now, if you look at markings, every board of that house should have some type of marking on it. And the roof, the floor joists, the backside of baseboards or trim, all that would have some type of marking. See here, even the one in the lower left-hand corner, what did it say, Bay City? Look for fixtures. Not everyone. Now this is going to be something that's going to be tough because most of your plumbing fixtures have probably been replaced. But the one on the left, Sears and Roebuck, the little etching that you see here, the scratching, that was delivered last time I gave this presentation down in Adrian, I think it was, south of here. And they brought it in, that was off their toilet. And they took a little pencil and marked it up, and that was the sketch, the emblem of the lamp. And they knew their market. The hardware, the doorknobs, beautiful doorknobs, and the knockers. And the one on the right, arms are folded, right? You pick the arms up. Oh, I'm sorry, the one on the left, that's the arms that are down there though. When you go to knock, you pick it up, and you can see here on the right, I don't know if you can make that out, it's Aladdin Homes. It's into it. Beautiful, beautiful marking. Look at these catalogs, see what you can find. Look at the interiors. A lot of times there are interior pictures that go with it. See, are the windows and doors and things like that in their proper place. Again, you could look at the records, bill of sales. Conduct a building permit. Sometimes the municipality will have a building permit. They'll keep those. They may even have some drawings on hand. Permits, mortgages, deeds. Shipping labels. Sometimes those are on the back of a piece of wood. Or in the attic. Attics are always a good place to find discards. So, is it site built? Is it a catalog house? Or is it a kid house? You know, it doesn't matter. The better homes we see today are kid homes. They've lasted. They've proved their existence. They've proved the strength that they were built with and the integrity. So, regardless of your preference, we call it home, and we'll leave the light on for you.
So we have some time for a couple of questions, and then we will head down to the Clarke to go look at that, I didn't say it, that wonderful exhibit. Those aren't my words. So if anybody has any questions.
I can speak pretty loud. Have you ever run across the Sears Kit Barn? We thought we had one in Clarke County and it got torn down about 2 years ago.
Yes.
And you know the location of any?
I will have to get back with you on that. You want to leave me your name and number, I'll see what I can do. But yeah, there are a couple of clip barns, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Over here.
Hi, I'm in the very back, sorry. So a popular feature of the Sears Roebuck catalog kit homes was that they would advertise items in the drawings of the houses saying, you can find this on page 275 or you can find this on page 35. Did Aladdin have something like that, or did they outsource all fixtures to other companies?
The fixtures?
Oh, sorry, not fixtures, furnishings.
Oh, furnishings. I don't know the answer to that. I bet you can find it in the exhibit. I don't know, can anybody help me on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There were separate.
I agree with you, yes.
There were separate furnishings catalogs, and there's a couple furnishings catalogs that are on display. Generally, the home catalog didn't have all the furnishings in it. You had to go to the separate furnishings catalog.
And that might be true with accessories. Or was that part of the original?
Accessories as well.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You could buy the furnace, you could buy toilet features, you couldn't buy a stove, but you could buy the cabinets.
And that's from an expert right there.
Sorry.
You're the expert. This is Mrs. Smith, and her house is on display in the exhibit. And I had the opportunity to meet you and your guests, so thank you. Any questions? She could probably answer them.
Yeah, you mentioned the Lewis Liberty homes and the Sterling homes, also from Bay City. And I live in a kid home in Shepherd, Michigan. And there's probably 10 homes in town that I've looked at that are similar. And I know they're kid homes by looking at them. My question is, did Liberty Lewis and Sterling mark everything like Aladdin did? Now, my neighbor's house across the road and my house are similar, and we think they're both Sterling houses because I have a 1920 magazine. But he found maybe 1 or 2 pieces marked, and I went through my house, and I can't find markings in the attic or anywhere.
They would always mark them because they had to assemble them. Now, sometimes they could be on the end where you wouldn't see them.
Right.
But they didn't always have the same system. Like I think it was Montgomery Ward's. They used numbers, where Sears and Roebuck, I think they used numbers and letters. And I believe Aladdin, they used just the words. This will be rafter. So I don't know if that helps, but
Thank you. Yeah.
So I think for those who'd like to go get a look at some of the stuff that Ron has spoken about, we're happy to welcome you down to Clarke, which is just down the hallway. And please give a round of applause for Ron for joining us today.